We're live there. Let me make sure we're live on the YouTube. Okay, I think we are live. Chat, let me know if we are live. Let me send out a tweet to let the world know we are live. Because if you don't tweet it, it's not real. Am I right, Gene?
Exactly. Twitter, because Twitter is real life, right?
That's exactly
it is
right.
real life.
It is absolutely. It's the only thing that beats it for real life is the comment sections in YouTube. I would say that's a little more real life, but all right, we are live. Good. All right, hello everybody. Welcome. This is Jaffe and Gene Park. Gene Park, I have never met you. We've tweeted once or twice before, and you reached out to me amid the Metroid Gate. And by the way, let's be clear. I say Metroid Gate with great reverence because the Washington Post, and it's so sad that I would have to tell some people, but you work for one of the greatest newspapers in the history of newspapers. Let's be clear, Gene. Democracy dies. Where does it die, Gene?
In dread.
No. Well, yes, it dies in the goddamn dark. If you've seen Spielberg's great film, The Post, it's all about. You don't know all the reporters there, right? You've never met Woodward and Bernstein, have you?
I actually have met Bob Woodward. We actually put him on Twitch.
Really?
Yeah. He had no idea what the hell was going on. But, we had him on Twitch and everything. So I've met Bob. I haven't met Bernstein. But I've seen him around the office.
That's amazing. That's so cool. So, well, thank you
actually,
for. Go ahead.
At the old building of the Washington Post, I think I had Woodward's old desk actually. So.
No, you did not. That's amazing. Oh my god. Have you always reported games in tech, or you've done different beats, as they say?
That's a great question. I've only been a games journalist for the last 2 years. I've been like a regular journalist covering crime, like health, military, business, all of that stuff for a long time. But obviously, like, as you said in your tweet, I'm a hardcore Metroid gamer. So I've been playing games for a long time. I've been writing about games like freelance every once in a while.
Right.
And before I got the job as a games reporter at the Washington Post, which is amazing. I was doing like a social media and audience work, so that's why we had Bob Woodward on Twitch, because I was like, let's get Bob Woodward on Twitch, man. That's gonna be crazy.
That I'm trying to remember. It shows. I sometimes I got to be honest. I get him a little bit mixed up. Who's the guy who just wrote the Trump book? That was Woodward, right?
That's Woodward, yeah.
Okay,
Woodward's kind of like the one that's kind of busier,
right? Because he just did. Yeah. I just read his Colin Powell interview that he did in July. Which I thought was it was great. I didn't even know.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I didn't even know he'd done that. That's right. Yeah. Okay, so make sure the audio is good. Can you guys hear us great? Everything's great. If it is. So Gene, you hit me. What are you smoking, Gene? What do you got, buddy?
It's just a regular Juul vape, but it's Post Malone as a Mona Lisa.
Oh, okay, but it's not pot.
It's not pot, no.
I started vaping the pot recently, and I enjoy it so much.
Nice. I'm on the clock, so I gotta be sober for this one.
Yeah. Okay.
I have to maintain decorum as a Washington Post reporter.
Oh, I understand. I respect
that. As a reminder to you and the audience.
Understood. And
but I'm still gonna vape because I'm in my own goddamn home. So.
Understood. Absolutely. So you reached out, which I appreciate, on the Twitter, and so I know you had some stuff on Metroid because you're writing a piece on Metroid. Let's talk about that. Depending on the time you have, I certainly want to ask you about games journalism. I certainly want to ask you about the industry if you have time. But you were the one who reached out and said, hey, let's talk Metroid. So I'm here for you, sir. So go.
Sure. I just wanted to get your comments. Well, apologies to your audience. You already put out your last Metroid video. And
but when the Washington Post calls, you pick up the fucking phone.
So. It's my fault. So sorry about that. But so I watched it and I feel like I really got a clear sense of where you're coming from. Obviously, you seem very frustrated in the stream, and obviously you couldn't hit the goddamn pets, right?
Right.
I saw all those clips. I want to start first with things that I totally agree with you on. I saw a reply of yours where you say, I think the map design is very confusing.
Yeah.
And I wrote that in my review, actually. And before people think that I have a bias towards Metroid, I actually gave Metroid the lowest Metacritic score on Metacritic, Metroid Dread, with a 7.0. and I specifically talk about the map design, where I say Planet ZDR Metroid Dread makes a noble attempt at making locations memorable, right? Like the backgrounds are often stunning, but while the planet has 8 different regions, I wrote, more than any other Metroid game to date, the expansion seems to work against the game's strengths. For example, the Kataris region is supposed to represent the classic fire and brimstone trope. However, there are at least 2 other regions with significant rooms also caked in lava and fire, including the room that you were in.
Right, in the background.
You saw the lava in the window. That's not the lava area that is leading towards the lava area. And that's something that I didn't understand until repeat playthroughs, and we'll get to that later. But so this makes navigating the map a pain, since your mind has to keep track of multiple lava-infested regions to revisit. This would be less of an issue in a game with fewer regions, but I don't believe the 8 regions do enough to distinguish themselves from one another. And I think that's kind of like what a core argument of what you were making, where those fucking blocks. Sorry, I shouldn't cuss.
Why?
But I feel so comfortable. So
yes, that's right.
But those blocks don't look like any like distinguishable from anything else. And if you do say yes, there is a tutorial. I think for me, I agree with your points that Metroid is really, really hard in terms of an onboarding process, and I think that reflects in sales. I think that reflects in the amount of Metroid games we've had and the amount of hype that Metroid games get. They're relatively lower than even Sora showing up in Smash Brothers, right? Because those games are hard to get into. Because new players like yourself, someone who hasn't played a Metroid game since 1984,
right,
that's not innate in their understanding of the game and the game logic, right?
I think that's absolutely true. Yeah.
For me, as someone who's playing a Metroid game, I'm just gonna shoot every goddamn thing because like who knows where there's a block. So like that's a natural instinct for me, and I think to your point, there was a tutorial that tells you that.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing the Metroid Dread hasn't really solved is making that onboarding process a little bit easier, while at the same time making sure that it's not holding your hand, because the game doesn't want to hold your hand either.
What's weird though is so many Metroidvanias that have been inspired by Metroid and Castlevania, but have solved that problem. So it's I can appreciate what the fans are saying and what you're saying as a fan, which is like that, but that's Metroid. And I'm down with that. I don't have a problem if Nintendo wants, or anybody wants to put out a game that's like, look, fuck you. We're going, specifically for our hardcore. We don't have to be for everyone. And that's fine. I just didn't know that's what it was. I saw the advertisements. I saw the reviews. I'm like, oh, it's another really cool character. I knew Metroid. I had played Super Metroid a little bit, not much. And I had known Samus and all that from Smash and everything. And I was just like, oh, it's another cool AAA Nintendo game. I'm in. Let me play this thing. It's got great reviews. And I don't know how they could have made it clear that, hey, let's be, this is a non-intuitive game for a lot of people. But I was just like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? And you're talking about the sales. I was really interested in your take on this. I mean, I know only in England, we've only gotten sales from England so far, but England week 2 of Metroid, they've dropped 66% in sales from the first week. And so, I mean, do you think that's sort of like it's front loaded and there's a lot of fans that came out and now it's going to do what a Metroid does, which is sort of middle around compared to like a traditional top franchise from Nintendo?
I mean, it's hard to tell, right? I think there's been a lot of hype from Metroid. I've seen a lot of big streamers play it. Similarly, I've also seen a lot of big streamers struggle with the game. A lot similar. I saw a big streamer. I'm not going to mention his name because I'm not looking to blast anyone. Really big streamer. He had 30,000, 40,000 people on his channel, and he couldn't even get past a room like in the second screen. Like he was like taking a while. And then like chat was roasting him like, I think he's really legitimately too stupid to figure this out.
Right.
I was kind of laughing because it's like, yeah, that's a really, really simple puzzle. You should shoot the red thing, right? But he didn't get it. But this guy plays a lot of games,
right? I'm literally fucking playing Aria of Sorrows right now. I'm playing a wonderful game called Unsighted, which is a Metroid meets Link to the Past. If you haven't played it, I highly recommend it. It's on Game Pass. It just came out recently. It's made by, I think, 2 people. But anyway, yeah, it's like, even that thing you're talking about, the game, on one hand, it's like, here are these weird red organic blocks or whatever that you can shoot, and that opens up the level. I'm like, oh, okay, I've been trained now. That's interactive.
That was training that you got because it was really clear. Right? You understood that.
Right. And when I got to the part about shoot everything, like I think the other part, and this I will blame on the tutorial, the way it's written is that maybe Metroid fans, and it sounds like you guys do, Metroid fans have an understanding of the vernacular, but even the concept of blocks, like it's like when it first gives you that, it literally shows you a geometric form. It is a block, right? A very clear,
very Mario-like
it's a cube.
Design.
That's
right.
Block, and then the next thing, it's an organic thing that's part of a cave wall, and it's like, hey, if you get stuck, shoot everything or whatever. And I'm like, okay, sure. And then it introduces you to the red organic things that you can blow up. And then you end up getting into a room and you're stuck and you're like, well, there's a lot of reasons you could be stuck in a Metroid game. You could not have picked up the right power-up. You could be lost in the map. You could be going to the wrong place. So I think that, yes, it was in the tutorial, and a lot of people hit me on that. Like, it told you what to fucking do. And A, I'm like, I don't think it was a very well-done tutorial on that part. And B, as a designer, that to me really just screams of, we were focus testing or play testing the game. People were getting stuck. We don't have time to fix this. Put a fucking message in there. Okay, so if you get stuck, shoot everything. Okay, good. Can we ship the game? That's kind of what it felt like to me.
Okay, yeah. I get that. I think so my piece is basically arguing that, you know, like we always talk about the gameplay loop of game, right?
Yes.
Like Halo has 30 seconds of fun. The gameplay loop is shoot guns, throw grenades, and jump and punch people, right?
Right.
Great gameplay loop, right? Gameplay loop for a game like Diablo is, you know, like hit things, pick up weapons, hit more things, you get more weapons. That's a great gameplay loop, right? My argument for Metroid is that the gameplay loop is the entire game. Like, you really got to like for example, you were talking about how like you hate like holding L to like aim and do the free aim, right?
Yeah.
I get that. Like, it's like that's a new mechanic that was introduced in the 3DS game, but like a lot of people are just being introduced to it in Dread because nobody goddamn played Samus Returns on 3DS, right?
Okay.
So like that's really hard to get, but you have to keep remembering to always aim like that, and like the game is never like stopping in terms of like what it's stacking on top of you. Like, you have to always remember, like the game teaches you the slide mechanic at the very like start of the game, right?
Right.
You have to always keep sliding towards the final boss. Like, the final boss is asking you to slide. So like, Metroid is about an accumulation of knowledge and experience. Where by the end of the game, you feel like, okay, I beat the game. I beat the game in 8 hours, my first run, right?
Right.
I'm gonna do it again, and I'm gonna do it faster. I'm gonna do it better. And then, so then with that knowledge, with that learned knowledge of, okay, I know which blocks to shoot, or I understand this, I'm going to keep doing this over and over again so I can get the better endings, because Metroid in 1986 basically had speed running built into the design. Like, you find out that she was a woman when you beat the game fast enough, which is incredible. Right?
Oh, I didn't know that was a bonus to find that out. I thought that was just...
Exactly.
Okay.
It's just baked into the design. Speed running is baked into the game's design. So the argument that I'm making is that like you really do gotta finish the game entirely. So to your point, the game is very unwelcoming to a lot of people because like you can't like that's a hard concept to grasp. Beat the entire game.
Well, it is, but even the aiming thing you're talking about. I mean, look, I was saying on my stream to someone, I don't know if you remember it. There was a game by one of the guys on the Doom team. It wasn't Romero or Carmack. It was someone else. And I think it was called Crack.com that came out for the PC ages ago. And it was the first time I ever had like, okay, the mouse will aim and the keyboard will move and you can shoot 360. It wasn't like I didn't understand. It was, you know, I think this is a really shitty controller to play Metroid with. And because you've got this little sliver of a button and I got fat fucking fingers and I'm just sitting there going... it's a pain to shoot that way. I knew to do it, but yes, I think it's a great point you bring up that it's unwelcoming. My question would be then, what do you think? Like, is that? I mean, no one's at fault, but in terms of like, if you're making Metroid, would you agree that that was a game this time around that has been marketed like, hey, come have this really cool outer space adventure with this badass character, and it's kind of a 2.5D side scroller shooter. I mean, that's what I thought I was getting into.
Mhm.
Would I be forgiven for thinking that based on the marketing materials?
I don't think so because I think, Metroid hasn't had a lot of mind share in the last few years, right?
Right.
The old joke is that, oh, that's Mr. Metroid from Smash Brothers, right?
Right,
So,
right.
but Nintendo did do a lot of marketing for it, but it really felt like it was being marketed towards people who knew Metroid. They were talking like, do you know about the Chozo race, David Scott Jaffe?
I do, but I only because I played this game. But
Exactly, exactly. If you didn't know, like Nintendo for some reason was like kind of spoiling the entire thing, where it's like, oh, this game is going to be entirely about the Chozo background. And it's like me as a Metroid enthusiast, I was like, you know what, that would have been kind of nice to know, like discovering in the end.
right,
So it's like it really felt like they were marketing towards me. It's like, hey, Gene, remember the Chozo? We talked about it back in Super Metroid and 3DS. Remember the secret ending in 3DS? Well, they're coming back now. And I was like, yeah, of course I play. I'm one of the 800,000 people that played the 3DS version. But so it really felt like it was kind of like really, really targeted towards folks like me. And I'm sure that might have been confusing for folks like yourself or anyone else, someone more casual, to think, oh yeah, this is a cool run and gun 2.5D shooter, and maybe it's like Hollow Knight. Again, to your point, and
yeah,
I actually raised this in my review that games like Hollow Knight and Ori and Blind Wisp, of the Blind Forest, or whatever, on Xbox, they have kind of done that better in terms of onboarding folks in.
yes,
Which is why the Metroidvania, and again, the RESR or Castlevania, which is why the Metroidvania genre is so popular now, is because there has been compromises made to design.
well, yeah. Even
I
it's funny
guess.
because it's almost like Metroidvania means different things now. Like someone like yourself, if someone, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe by the nature of putting Metroid and Vania together, it actually is a nuanced term. Where I always assumed it was 2D. It doesn't even have to be 2D anymore. I know the last Star Wars game was a Metroidvania, but
Yeah, yeah, kind of.
it's basically like you get stuck because you don't have the abilities. Explore the abilities, go back. You open the map. It's about reading. That's Metroidvania to me. But it sounds like
Kind of Metroidvania.
Metroid is not Metroidvania. Metroid is Metroid, and so for me, I thought Metroid proper was a Metroidvania, which I love. But if it had been pitched to me like you're pitching, I never would have fucking bought the thing. I'm like,
Yeah.
that sounds horrible to me. Like, I'm sure people love it, but I've never speed ran a game in my life. The closest I've come
Yeah.
is when I've taken too much ADD med and I'm playing a game and it feels like I'm speed running, but I'm just
Yeah.
looking at the wall. But no, I don't.
Yeah.
It's not my cup of tea.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said in your last video, you said I don't play games to be to be challenged, or I don't play games to become the best player in the world. I'm
Yeah.
the same way too, and I love Demon Souls. I love Dark Souls.
I do
play
too.
Dark Souls.
I do too.
I play Dark Souls to relax. It's like meditation for me, right? Because I know the game so well, so I get like it's kind of like solving a Rubik's like if
Yeah.
I'm like a professional Rubik's cube solver, I'm just doing it like for therapy, you know?
Right.
And that's kind of like what Metroid is. But again, to your point, you're right. I think Nintendo didn't market the Metroid as Metroidvania because they don't use those terms. They just market it as Metroid. I think a lot of people didn't understand that too, because it's not a they didn't really acknowledge that Metroidvania, the game design and the marketing didn't really acknowledge that the Metroidvania genre has kind of evolved past Metroid, I guess, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying Metroid is outdated or anything. I love Metroid Dread, even if I gave it 7.0. I'm playing the hell out of it, right? But it very much is still Metroid. It retains its original identity. There's still moves that the game doesn't even teach you that are required for 100%. The game never teaches you an advanced technique called Shine Spark. It does teach you Shine Spark, but it doesn't teach you how to do the Shine Spark in the middle of the air. You have to press two buttons at the same time. That's something that the community had to figure out for themselves, and that's what I learned for myself, and I'm able to do it. The game never teaches you that, and Metro games always have something that just don't teach you something, you know?
Right.
And it's like you just gotta discover that on your own.
And you have to do that to beat the game. I mean, or no?
You don't have to do that to beat the game, but you have to do it to get 100% to master the game. And that's where a lot of folks who love Metroid, like myself, I'm trying to speed run the game too. I'm trying to get under 4 hours, right? That's something that we love and we value. Like I love playing. I've been playing nothing but Metroid Dread. Even if I gave it a 7.0, I've been doing nothing but playing it because I'm obsessed with. I've understood the map now. I understand how it works, and I love just running around doing things automatically.
If you were to review it again, then would the score be higher? It sounds like it's a better.
It does seem like it'll be a little higher, but I do feel like that my original criticisms about map design really still hold. I think
Right.
that even in terms of map design, Super Metroid was still better. Because
Right.
Super Metroid still took you to like an abandoned ship, wrecked spaceship on a surface. Like you never forget that moment because it's like you're going back up to the beginning of the game and you're finding this wrecked spaceship that you couldn't access before. At the very beginning of the game, and then now you got the power, and you're like, oh crap,
I get to
I
go
can
in the
really go
spaceship.
back and get that. And then there's another boss there, and there's a whole other level there. That moment doesn't exist in Metroid Dread. Like
See,
that
it's
moment of
so fascinating because when
recut,
you describe it that way, I'm like, I want to play that game. I want to play like I know a lot of people shit on the music in Dread. I thought the soundtrack was really good actually, but when I'm going through it and I'm in the fantasy of what I assumed I had purchased, which is like Alien or Dead Space 2, and I'm like, "Oh, I want to be in this horror shooter side scroller Nintendo game." That
And
sounds
Dread did market itself as such.
yeah, but
Like
that's
this is
not
a horror game,
right. What you're saying it is though sounds almost like the Metroid fans they wouldn't like it, but they could live with all the trappings of the window dressing removed, and they just want the mechanics of it. They just want this challenge, which is, I think, again, fair. But I didn't, when I picked up Demon Souls, I knew that this is a hard fucking game, and I'm like, okay, I know what I'm getting into. So, but yeah, let me ask you this: why do you think? I mean, I don't mind it at all. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, and it wasn't intentional at all. I'm not that cynical, but I have picked up more followers, and I don't mean just hate views. I mean people who, but because of this. But I mean, the Metroid fan base has been so angry on the internet with me, and I'm just kind of like going. When you explain it this way, I go, oh, the biggest problem is just they communicated, or either I'm too simple-minded to understand the marketing, or the marketing wasn't very good. But instead, the Metroid fan base, they're not expressing it the way you are. What do you think that's about?
Well, I mean that's just gamers, right? Like we were talking offline earlier about the console the fan war. I think a lot of it is just the root cause of just like internet toxicity. Like they don't really know you. So like I admit, like when I saw your gameplay trip a clip, like I was pretty heated too. I was like, how could he not know? Like look at all these other streamers like figure it out, right?
But that's the thing, the other streamers didn't figure it out. If you look at that, if you look at that,
they were kind of
motherfuckers,
shooting by
they were
accident
just shooting and
it
it opened. Well, yeah, I would do that too. But I mean,
I think my argument for Metroid is that Metroid games, not even Metroidvania, Metroid games are games that really reward player curiosity and like experimentation. So you really just gotta mess with like whatever's going on, and then again, Super Metroid, the game that everyone calls perfect, and I also kind of believe too. Again, that game has some moves that never teaches you how to get 100%. You can beat the game without ever knowing those moves.
Right.
But if you want to master it completely, you have to figure out what those moves are by yourself,
Right.
or learn from the community. And Metroid Dread seems to kind of retain that too. One of the fascinating things one of the things that really improved my opinion of Metroid Dread, and why I would give it a higher score now, is because once I replayed it and once I've seen the community crack it open, there are many ways to actually speed run it or break sequence, where you don't have to go through the ways the game tells you. You can mostly kind of go and do about your own thing, which is incredible. And I didn't even realize that in my first run, and that's something that I could not really figure out on my first run. I don't think anyone could really figure out on their first run, even for a professional Metroid speedrunner, because they still need to figure out the game for themselves. But the way the game accommodates that kind of experimentation, I think a lot of people miss that. I think Metroid fans have missed that mystery and that intrigue and that like we're just gonna leave it up to you. So games like Hollow Knight or Ori or even the Castlevania games, they do kind of like hold your hand, whereas like Metroid is like we're just gonna like show you what buttons to push and that's it, and then you have to figure out how you're gonna use those buttons, you know?
Right. I mean, I would, as a player, I would have appreciated a tutorial then that said, this is what that is. And I know people are saying, but it said that. It said shoot everything. I'm like, yeah, but what you're describing is actually a very appealing mindset. Like, I'm like, oh, that could be a really cool game. It's like, here's the buttons. It's about fucking figuring it out. Go have fun or don't, but that's all we're doing. I don't think that sounds like a bad proposition, but I think you have to be in the headspace and know what you're getting into. And if you approach it at face value, maybe because you've got so many Castlevania games out there or Metroidvania games out there, it doesn't, what you're describing is not apparent. What's apparent is go on this cool space horror adventure like every other Metroidvania game. So,
yeah,
you know.
And even Metroid fans, and I'm going to give him a shout out because I'm going to say nice things about him. Gerard Khalil, he's a completionist on YouTube. His whole thing is just mastering games and completing them 100%, right? So obviously he's a huge Metroid fan. Even in his recent review that just came out this past week, he said, and he loves Metroid Dread. He said, I was a little bit surprised at how not welcoming to new players this is. Because as he's a professional Metroid player, and he was able to get right into it real quick. But even he was able to kind of remove himself from that mentality, like as I tried to do. And it's like, okay, well, you know what? A lot of people are going to really struggle with this game,
right?
And sure enough, they are. You did. A lot of streamers did. A lot of people are finding this game really hard. It was even my headline. This game cramps my hands because I have to press L and everything like that. Again, to your point, that controller does suck for this game. Right. That's why I had to use a regular Pro controller for this game, especially for some of the bosses. I can do that now because I'm good at the game.
Right, you know what to do. Yeah,
I know what to do. I can pass the game. I can beat all the bosses no problem without getting hit, which is a great feeling. And I wish new Metroid players would kind of get to that point. You know,
as a fan, would you want to see Metroid like if the only way Metroid could become a bigger thing, would you want to see it compromise the philosophy that you seem to like so much about it?
I think the Metroid series has tried to do that, but they tried to do that in like the Game Boy Advance games, you know?
Okay.
With Metroid Fusion, the one that came out in 2004, right before this one, 17 years before.
Right.
You know, it really tried to do that. And in this one, because there's been such a long time between Metroids, it feels like this one was kind of like a return to form from like the classic games, you know?
Right.
But Metroid Fusion was that game. And Metroid Zero Mission, the remake of the first Metroid would drive you absolutely nuts, David. Because all of that stuff that you hate, that is like most of the game.
Right.
Like you have to shoot everything. Like there are hidden walls that it's a Nintendo Power game. You gotta be subscribed to Nintendo Power back in the day to understand like where to go, right? So Metroid Zero Mission was very, very linear in terms of like, okay, you got to go here and you got to do this and you got to use this. They tried that, and it seems like Dread is like, okay, well, you know what? This time we're just gonna do it this other way. So I do think that there's a lot of value in a bigger platform like the Switch to be able to kind of go back to that and reintroduce people to Metroid, to Samus Aran as a character, to the world, and to the mood and atmosphere and that feeling of like getting over certain things. But also kind of like maybe you could hold your hand a little bit more. And it feels like Nintendo should be good at this, you know? But Skyward Sword wasn't good at this, where it's like they tutorialize everything, and it's like maybe they're kind of learning now, but Dread feels like less than that, you know?
Do you think, just sort of at a more of a meta level about Nintendo, I mean, I believe it or not, because a lot of people are like, you know, I'm a Nintendo fanboy. I loved my Wii U, you know? I shed a little tiny tear when Iwata went, you know? I'm a huge fan. I don't know how old you are, but I was playing fucking, you know, Donkey Kong, you know, the day they rolled it into the fucking bowling alley in Alabama.
Yeah,
you know.
I'm 40, so I play Galaga in the ice cream shop too.
Right, right. So it's like I get it. I love that company, but would you? I mean, my take is they're kind of like where Apple is in terms of they're incredibly successful.
Yeah.
But Iwata is gone. Miyamoto is kind of almost like Stan Lee was at Marvel in the 70s and 80s. He's more of a figurehead at this point than actually in the trenches. It seems like their stuff isn't as magical. Is that nostalgia talking, or do you think literally there's a valid point there that they've become more of a really good, successful game company, but they're not what they were for the last 20, 30 years?
I think there's still a lot of magic left. Obviously, they haven't had a new Zelda left since 2017, but the last one was pretty great. I thought Mario Odyssey was pretty great. When you want to talk about magical, like you talk about like the excitement around Smash Brothers. Just last night, Sora from Kingdom Hearts was in there. Like there's still like so much magic that they can produce. I think that the jury's still out on whether they can do it, but I think Mario Odyssey was taken over by a new director. Zelda is taken over by a new director. Obviously, they're both not Miyamoto, so I do think that it's still there, but they really do seem to be drilling down on some of their core concepts, which is like Animal Crossing, Mario, Zelda, and Metroid has kind of like fallen by the wayside, obviously for like almost 2 decades.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the map design, like the big map. I mean, I agree with that 100%, but I didn't even play the game far enough to appreciate
exactly
your criticism, which is like there's not enough visual variety. But for me, even the map, like when you hit whatever the button is to bring up the map, I found it in really a hard. I mean, I know it makes me sound like a fucking 90-year-old man, but I had a hard time understanding that map, right? I mean, and I'm a guy who grew up with the Thomas guides in LA, going how the fuck do I can read a map, but I mean, compared to like other maps, like you mentioned Ori or Castlevania or whatever, that map is so detailed and so filled with little different colors and things that haven't unlocked yet that are still drawn out. And I had a hard time in that map. Usually in a Metroidvania, I can look at it and go, okay, these are the 4 areas I haven't explored yet. Let me go back to that area now and see if I can do something there. And this map, I'm just like, I don't fucking know where I'm supposed to go next. I mean, did you have a complaint with the map itself, like the presentation?
So I agree and disagree with you. I think the map itself as a utility is extremely useful because they label every like if you did get further in the game, the map would have become way more useful because like every single point you pass by in the game, whether even you interact with it or not, it's still gonna like mark, okay, this is a map where like the super missile must be shot. This is the door where the super missile must be shot. This is the area where you got to use grapple beam, right? So it's very, very specific and labeled like that. My complaint with the map, and I mentioned this in my review, is that it's very grid-like, So like, if you're a very visual person, I'm kind of getting that you are, you're not gonna get that because it's all blocks and it's all like done by like Excel sheet. It's very, very grid-like, and then like when you play the game, everything is just very straight, like perpendicular lines, right? So I was kind of like disappointed with that too, where it's like I can, like you kind of said, like it's like tile sets, right? And it's like, yeah, the game is very much designed by tile set. It's like here's a block here, here's a block here, here's a half block here. It's like it's almost like they built the game by Animal Crossing,
Yeah, it feels very old school in that way. It feels like
very,
a 2D
very old school in that way.
Editor.
And that's what I was kind of disappointed because again, going back to my praise of Super Metroid, again going back to that spaceship on the surface. Like that was just like a spaceship, like it didn't look like a block. It looked like a goddamn spaceship. Right. So like I remembered. I was like, I gotta go back here. I remember this place. There's no area or region in Metroid Dread that feels like that because there's a lot of labs and a lot of like caves and stuff like that. So I was kind of like, and again to your point, like to your last video, like there's so much crap going on in the background, right? And I feel like that they almost try to make the background so lively to make up for the fact that the foreground is very, very grid-like. Yeah. My argument is that they really, really should have focused more on the foreground details.
Right, because they blend sometimes, right? I mean, like the art. Can we just talk about that room, the infamous room that I got stuck in real quick? I mean, if even that, right? I mean, am I wrong? But that art was confusing. Like it looked like you could jump through those 2 holes, and when you couldn't, you know what I'm talking about? There were 2 light areas. I don't want to get too specific if you don't have an image in your head, but I will say the art direction of the game it felt very, and I don't know how it would be like playing it on the actual Switch. Like I played on a big screen, but it things blended so much that sometimes I would try to jump on something, and it's like, oh, that's in the background, and I'm like, you know, I mean, I don't know, maybe that was just me, maybe that's my eyes getting.
Yeah,
shit.
I didn't. Yeah, maybe I didn't really have a problem with that. But for me, it's like, you know, like I wanted more memorable set pieces on the
Sure.
foreground. You know, like the player is running over that stuff, the player is shooting that stuff.
Right.
That is the stuff that the player is going to remember. The player is going to grab onto that ledge. That is the stuff that the player is going to remember in their head.
Right.
And then for me, in the first run, I was like, I can't remember any of this crap because everything looks the same. Everything is just a grid going like this.
I wonder
So,
if it
like,
was a budget issue. Maybe they didn't. I mean, I thought the animation and the control of Samus was phenomenal. Probably,
absolutely,
probably
yeah,
one of the
that's
best
it.
characters I've played in a 2D game ever in terms of just that sense of, you know, motion fidelity. But I wonder if there was a budget issue because it really didn't look. People are saying this looks. You know, if somebody were to tell me, somebody said, if this was 1999 and it was on Steam and it wasn't called Metroid, no one would really be talking about this game. And I don't know if you agree with that or not, but it definitely doesn't feel like a AAA holiday release in terms of production value. It kind of feels like they only had so many, you know, it's like, guys, we're out of money. We've got like the metal background and we've got some of this organic shit. That's what you got to work with. Go. Like, you know what I mean? It just felt very samey visually. No?
It's hard for me to say. I think there's, you know, like I tweeted earlier last week. I was like, I'm blocking anyone who says that Metroid isn't a $60 game. So apparently, I should block you too.
It
right?
isn't what?
So,
Isn't what?
I'm blocking anyone that says Metroid isn't a $60 game.
Well, I'm not. I didn't say it was or wasn't. I'm saying that you would be forgiven if you looked at it visually.
I do think that there's some validity to, like, okay, like there would be no hype if this was a game on Steam.
Right.
And it wasn't called Metroid, and like I think word of mouth would help it get along because I do think that the overall design, again, the overall gameplay loop of the entire game. Once people finish the entire game, people are going to be realize, oh, this game is actually really smartly designed and really really tightly designed. But I think that's really hard to tell immediately from your first like hour or so, or even in my case, my argument is it's hard to tell even the first run. You know,
Right.
Like I have a deeper appreciation of the game after the third time I've beaten it. You know,
Right.
and that is not a great way to sell a game. You know. Like,
Do you think
like
Metroid fans would be upset if the next one they said, you know what, we're going to have, what's that computer's name, Adam or whatever his fucking
Adam,
name?
yeah.
If at the very beginning he just comes out and he says, I mean, it would have to be written to the story, but this is what this game is. And and they set it up more just like, we're not going to hold your hand, but we want to make it clear. Like, do you think the game would do, like, everything you're describing makes me want to go back and play it now because I'm like, oh, it's almost like in Free Guy when he puts the glasses on or They Live. Yeah. It's like, oh, I didn't know this is what that was. I'll judge it, or not even judge it, but I'll approach it in a totally different way. But I mean, I'm privileged that I get to have a conversation with, you know, a games journalist who also happens to be a hardcore fan of the franchise. But don't you think this is something people should know? Because now I'm like, oh, I'll try it again.
I think to your point, well, now that you know, I'm super glad to hear that you're actually interested in it because in your last video you said, I just want the 5% of people out there who's not totally mad at me to kind of understand, okay, he's not completely irrational. I like to think that I might be part of that 5% now.
You have been admitted into the 5% club, Gene. Everybody who can, give Gene a picture of my future wife on the chat. I would appreciate it.
I'm part of Jaffe 5%.
You goddamn right.
I'm pronouncing it right, Jaffe, right? That's right. Okay, yeah. People say Jaffe, and it's like, guys, he's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
The people have said his name before. What was the question again? So to your point, the game does, like, I don't know if you fought the Emmy, the indestructible robot.
I fought the
Adam
first
really
two.
Does tell you over and over again, you cannot kill this thing. You have to run. So like the game does at certain point does try to tell you like this is what you got to do. But again, there are certain things that the game doesn't tell you. You know, like there are certain bosses later in the game where like you really just got to figure out like, okay, there's a little environmental detail that changed. Like maybe I should interact with that now. And so, oh, I figured it out, and now this is how to beat the boss. Oh, I died. okay, let me try that again. Let me interact with that thing again, and then let me try that again, and then get to the next phase of the boss. And it's like, okay, well now I kind of got the rhythm of this. Oh, I died again. Okay, let me try again. Let me interact with this thing. Let me get the rhythm of the boss. Okay, I'm doing this. I'm actually not getting hit. I beat the boss.
Right.
That's awesome. That's such a great feeling. It's a lot like Dark Souls in that way. I hate to say Dark Souls as a games journalist, but it really is in terms of like I figured out the pattern. I figured like through doing this over and over again, I got this boss number down pat, and now I can beat this boss no problem without getting hit at all.
Right.
That's a great feeling, and again, to your point, I don't think that a lot of Metroid fans would mind if there was a little bit of a more exposition at the beginning that says you really got to figure this game out for yourself, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I was telling somebody, I don't know if you remember this. This was back in, well, I don't know. You're 10 years younger than me, but there was an Indiana Jones game that came out when I must have been about 15, and it was no one talks about it. I forget what it was called. I found it on the internet, but the high concept was like the logo was Indiana Jones and the something something, and it was no one told Indiana Jones the rules, and no one's going to tell you. And it's like, oh, like that was, I got it. I'm like, I'm going to come in. There's no manual. There's no text. There's no description. Go. And I'm like, that's compelling. And so now I'm more interested in looking at Metroid. Can I ask you? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, also, I think like people, including myself, have forgotten that Metroid is really, really goddamn hard. You know, like even for me as a Metroid, I haven't played the Metroid game in a long time. Like it took this game to remind me, oh yeah, these games have always been hard. Nintendo doesn't market hard games.
But see, there's a difference between hard. That's what I got pissed at the fans for, because again, I don't take pride in being a good or bad game player. I'm usually at best on my best day average, right, on any game. I'm not one of these guys. I know people in my stream that are like, you know, oh, I finished that in 4 hours. And I mean, let me give you an example. I started as a tester in the industry, and they gave me Hook to test, the Spielberg movie, right? The other
test, played that game. I love that game.
I love that game too. I was a tester. Thank you very much. I contributed. But the other testers finished that game in 3 hours, and it took me 3 days. Right. And I was stunned. I went to my therapist the first day of my job, and I said, they're going to fire me. He's like, they might.
Gamer, yeah.
Yeah. He's like, they might. I'm like, yeah, I know. What are you going to do? But the thing is, though, when you say hard, I'm sure it is hard as well. But my struggles with it, yeah, there's a difference between a game being hard, like Demon Souls is hard.
Sure.
But it feels clear. Metroid is might be hard, but it was opaque. And that's why
I think Demon Souls does such a great job in how to teach you the game, you know?
Yeah.
And that's why I always defend Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and like, oh, it's too hard. And it's like, no, the game is just teaching you, and you just got to keep learning. To your point, there are things that Metroid just straight up doesn't teach you.
Right.
It just straight up doesn't want to teach you it. And I do think
what a dick! What a dick of a game!
It just straight up doesn't teach you certain things.
Right.
And it's like, I do think that the game would benefit for its audience. To my earlier point, Nintendo doesn't know how to market hard games. Look at Dark Souls. Dark Souls was marketed to a fault, saying, "This game, prepare to die. This game is going to kill you." Right. And then that game blew up because then all the niche audience of people who love hard games were attracted to it, and then that word of mouth spread, and then now Souls is just its own thing, right? I think Nintendo doesn't really trust that the hardcore audience enough.
Right.
Kind of like being like, hey, this game is really hard. You should all play it. This game is awesome, you know?
Yeah, but then why would they greenlight it? It's like, why would you approve that design? But anyway, all I'll tell you is the chat the chat with you makes me happy because now I have another game I'm excited to play again. I was never going to touch that fucking thing again. But can I ask you some other sort of a little bit more 30,000 foot view questions about Metroid and stuff?
Sure. I think we talked about Metroid Dread a lot. But
okay, well, I'm curious what you thought about the Kotaku article yesterday about Samus. I don't know if you saw it, where it was saying, you know, it's time to evolve her character, and she didn't really have any real emotion in this game. Mm-hmm. And in that, Nintendo's kind of missing an opportunity to sort of flesh out what could be a very compelling character. What was your take on that?
Sure. Well, first of all, I have a lot of respect for Kotaku. I've even wanted to work there, so not here to dunk on any journalists. I do think that there's some merit in terms of wanting her to do more. I do think that the game did enough. As someone who beat the game, I do think the game did enough to make me feel a connection to the character. And again, there was one word in that article that is like, okay, maybe you shouldn't have said that she should have smiled more, because it's like she's in a foreign planet where like there's 7 indestructible robots wanting to kill her. Like I don't think she needs to go full Guardians of the Galaxy Chris Pratt and start joking about how her boob size or anything like that.
Right.
Like, oh well, I'm glad I wore my sports bra
Right.
to this alien planet. Like I don't want any of that crap, right? But it does. I don't know if you know about this game Metroid Other M, where it was like swung completely the other way, where like they made her really, really emotional, and there was a huge backlash from the community for that. So it feels like this game is kind of like a reaction to that, where it's like, okay, we're only going to show her the emotions that we know that she can really like sell, and make her look cool, and make her look competent, and a badass bounty hunter, the baddest bounty hunter in the world, and they really did that. But but at the same time, it's Nintendo. Nintendo doesn't do characters like this,
Yeah, they don't.
Nintendo doesn't evolve its characters into having a story and then they learn something new by the end of it. Mario doesn't learn a goddamn thing by the end of any of his adventures.
No, they're he's like Mickey Mouse, right? He's
Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
It's Bugs Bunny. It's Bugs Bunny. Like Bugs Bunny isn't gonna learn. Bugs Bunny isn't gonna grow as a person. He's
Right.
Bugs Bunny.
Right.
Exactly. Like it's very much the golden age of cartooning. So again, Metroid is kind of like this weird balance of like this Flash Gordon space adventure kind of thing, but it's also influenced by Alien. So it's like they're trying to also kind of like have this like Ripley or type of like progression through the story. So it's kind of like it's like Nintendo doesn't really know what the hell to do with Metroid, And then this kind of that article kind of pointed to that thing where it's like we don't really do stories like this, but we kind of have this character that has been evolving in the last 30 years,
Well, okay, so to that, I mean, Nintendo is obviously right now financially can do no wrong. They kind of live in these, like I remember back in the Wii U days, they were awful, and now they're back. And then before that, there was the Wii, and they were amazing,
Yeah.
But it is interesting to me in that you. I guess what I'm wondering about is the future of that company, because on one hand, I don't know if you have kids. I have kids who are teenagers now, but their friends didn't come up caring about consoles. They care about tablets and phones and PC games and Among Us and Phasmophobia and all the stuff the streamers are playing, blah, blah, blah. And then there's obviously the older Nintendo fans that are this is what Metroid is. This is what this is. But, are they in danger in your mind of eventually becoming like comic books that are really only made for the people who grew up with them, and the people who are kids now have moved on to something else? I mean, because it feels very like I don't see kids running around caring as much about Mario and Link and all that as they did back in the day. But I see the fandom stronger than it ever was, but it tends to be older dudes. I mean, what is your perspective as someone who covers this stuff?
Yeah, we're dying out, right? I do see a lot of like older Gen Z and young millennial Nintendo fans, because a lot of them grew up on the Wii or the GameCube, right? So Nintendo was able to kind of secure that generation right now. In terms of like the kids, like I do think that Nintendo is kind of in trouble, right? Because Nintendo is a beautiful game developer. They make amazing games. They're one of the worst service providers in the world, right? And in a world and a market where so much is based on service and delivering that content to those audiences, Nintendo has really fallen behind, because they really want to focus on the Switch and like whatever weird ideas that they have. So I don't know. Like I don't think that Nintendo can continue to. I agree that I don't think Nintendo can continue to just survive on the goodwill and nostalgia forever. They try to do that with their games, right? They try to onboard more people with their games, with Mario games, with Mario Party games, with Smash and everything like that. But I do think I hope that they're starting to think about what other ways to reach audiences besides buy a Nintendo console. Because yeah, again to your point, like I also don't see kids running around with Mario stuff anymore. It's usually guys like me.
Yeah,
you know?
that's right.
So
Have you played the new Mario Party? Comes out this week or next week?
no, I haven't been a big Mario Party guy.
Right. Okay.
I don't play every Nintendo game.
Right.
So
I want to talk game journalists real quick because I'm always fascinated by the fans' response to game journalists. I mean, anybody
sure, I am too.
Well, anybody who hears you talk would be ashamed of themselves for talking about game journalists the way a lot of fans do, because you clearly know your shit. You clearly are a hardcore gamer. Are you an anomaly, or is it that the fans have game journalist wrong? I mean, like, I look at you and I go, he was a I don't know if you majored in journalism. I assumed you did. I assume you've studied it.
I did.
Okay.
I did.
You've been a reporter before you were a games reporter. And you obviously,
20 years, yeah.
right, and you know your shit in terms of what you're reporting on now in terms of video games. So I go, what's not to love? I'm a huge fan of the press, and when it I thought, I don't want to get into Trump, but I'm just like, the idea of painting the press as the enemy is staggering to me, right? But I also understand the fandom when they look at a lot of games journalists and go, are you really a journalist? You seem like a fanboy. Like, the fact that you can love Metroid like you do and still give it a 7 and justify that 7, that's pretty potent.
It hurt me, man.
Yeah, but you did it though. Whereas a lot of these guys are like, I'm fucking hype. It's a 9, it's a 10, and then you go back to them. I've literally had this with journalists in games where you go back to them 2 or 3 years later and they say, "Oh, well, I was just caught up in the hype." I'm like, motherfucker, you're a journalist. You don't have the luxury of getting. You think Roger Ebert was like, I know Temple of Doom was shit, but I was caught up in the hype. I mean, what is your take on games journalism and how the fans respond to you guys?
I think you mentioned Ebert because Ebert is like the main inspiration for me in terms of writing.
Yeah.
I love what he did in terms of film criticism, and like I've always, ever since I was young, ever since I was a kid, I was like, I want to do what Ebert did for film criticism, what I can do, hopefully for games criticism. Not sure if I'm doing that now, whatever. But I do think that the games journalists are maligned in the same way that the media and the press are maligned, right? Like, there are a lot of bad takes, there are a lot of bad articles. I'm not going to point out which ones, but that's a whole other discussion that we can have offline. But I think there are a lot of bad pieces, and a lot of people. The mass tendency is to say that, like, that represents game journalism, and when I say the media, I mean, like, it's kind of like how we always used to say you can never trust lawyers, right? Back in the 80s or 90s, right? Oh, lawyers are just whatever. And now lawyers are just the most powerful people in the world, and like, we don't care, right? But before, it's like, oh, you can never trust lawyers. They're such scumbags. It's kind of like that sweeping like generalization that kind of gets ingrained into people's minds. Whereas, like, they see a bad piece of games journalism, and it's like, okay, well, they're just always like this, Or like, I've been working at the Washington Post for 6 years. I haven't covered games until the last like year and a half or whatever. And like, I got all kinds of crap as a social media editor in terms of like our political coverage. And it's like, yeah, I get it, because like, we're a general newspaper. Some of our takes are going to be garbage, and some of it is going to be good.
Right.
And like, that kind of stuff, like, a lot of it has to do with like trying to make people understand that we're all different people. Like, I'm not like any other games journalists. So like, I would hope that like people would find the games journalists that they do enjoy, the ones that they do trust, and like there's a YouTuber called Skill Up, huge channel. It's got millions of views, and I disagree with him all the time. But at the same time, we are DMing each other all the time, exchanging notes on games that we're reviewing, and like that gives us like good perspective on like how we might be experiencing our game, and I really value our discussions on that, because I can always see where he's coming from. Right. So even if I disagree with someone, I know I can trust them, because I know how his thought process works. And I think a lot of people are already doing that. A lot of kids that you talk about these days that are watching streamers, they're already doing that already. They're already glomming onto the people that they know and trust.
I think that's true. I think that's true.
Yeah. I think people just need to kind of like remember, like, okay, well, that's just how it is. And sometimes those people might change too, and that's okay too.
When you were, you've been there for 6 years, so you were there when Bezos already owned the place. Is that correct?
Yep.
So have you noticed any, hands-on influence from Amazon, or it's that you wouldn't even know?
No, not at all, not at all. The most hands-on was that he gave us a bunch of money back in 2014 to hire a bunch of people. That's it.
Okay.
I was one of those people included. That's it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. But other than that, though, other than like that first shot in the arm, like here's millions of dollars to figure it out, and then like we kind of figured it out, and we're doing okay now.
Right.
So
interesting. Okay. Well, that's good. That's great to hear.
But otherwise, like our old editor Marty Barron, like he would just like never listen to Bezos. Like he would just like ignore him completely. So,
and Bezos was okay with it. He was like,
yeah, he's okay with it because like he knew what he was getting himself into. I'm buying a newspaper, and these are people that are just not going to listen to what the hell I'm going to say. So
okay, I have to ask this because it's just on my mind a lot lately. There was and I like him. I've met him a handful of times. A very good human being. I respect what he does. Dean Takahashi from VentureBeat.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
I look up Dean too.
Yeah. So, but I'm curious because this is maybe one of the things that like drives me crazy sometimes is that I don't even know if the word should be balance. It really probably shouldn't. But the balance between access and reporting on the truth or asking the tough questions, right? I mean, somebody asked him recently on his, how he does his month, every quarter or whatever. He has like the GamesBeat seminars and stuff.
I'll talk to whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So he had Bobby Kotick on, and I'm going, okay, well, this is a guy that, in 2018, Activision didn't pay any taxes. In 2018, they literally got over $100 million in tax credit from Americans. Why they need a tax credit, I don't fucking know. They've made changes to their games to capitulate to China. There's stuff to ask this guy other than, hey, what's new about Call of Duty? And somebody asked him, they said, why don't you bring things up to like one of the most powerful guys in games that are pretty relevant questions? And he says, well, if I do that, I'm not going to get him back. And I'm like going, who gives a shit? I mean, who do you serve? Do you serve Bobby Kotick or do you serve your readers, right? I mean,
yeah.
What do you talk to me about just sort of that struggle? I guess it must be a struggle. I mean, everyone you talk to that you have access to, do you get to ask the questions you want to ask, or do you feel that you're like, well, I better not go there because I might not get access again because PR won't like me?
I don't really worry about access. Like Call of Duty Cold War last year, I wrote about it too, where obviously it was all on Zoom because of goddamn quarantine. But like I asked a question to Call of Duty Cold War because it has Reagan in it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like whatever. Ronald Reagan is a historical figure. You can put him in any game, whatever. But I just want to pose a question. In this heated political climate, Ronald Reagan has become kind of a linchpin in terms of like how a lot of people on the left blame how we got here. So I wanted to ask you guys, how did you approach depicting Ronald Reagan, and what kind of balances that you want to have? I tried to make it a very fair question, and it's like, how could you put Ronald Reagan in a video game? I didn't want to do that, but I just wanted to understand their process of how they did that, so maybe we can get to a good answer. And then Activision just completely changed that question, and then just said when they posed it to the developer, they just said, oh, well, how did you engage with depicting historical figures like Ronald Reagan? And it's like, okay, that is a completely different question than when I was asking.
When you wrote your story on that, though, did you say that they changed the question?
I did say that they changed it, and a lot of other journalists saw that because they saw me ask the question, and they saw Activision deliberately change that question. So it's like, okay, we all saw this happen.
Right. So at least the story is Activision doesn't want that question asked. I mean, at least
Yeah, because they didn't want to address the political whatever, or they wanted to try to avoid that kind of political thing that basically what Far Cry 6 got itself into, right?
Right. So, well, it's so frustrating because as a guy, I don't design games anymore. At least I haven't in a while. I'm doing a couple little things. But I believe in the power of the medium. I think it's a beautiful medium, and I think it really is. We won't be alive to see it, but I think interactive storytelling is really going to be something our grandchildren and their children are doing, like we go to the movies. I mean, it's like the holodeck. That's coming, right? That's absolutely coming. But
The
yeah,
metaverse, yeah.
well, that's a different thing, but that's coming too. That'll be here when we're alive for it, hopefully.
Yeah.
But it frustrates me to no end though when I don't see that kind of pushback, and I'm so happy to hear that you did push back when it comes to things like that Kotaku reporter from a couple of months ago. Even guys who are journalists that I have great reverence for and admiration of were laying into this guy who was going, "Hey, Far Cry 6, what are you doing? You're claiming that you're about something, and yet nowhere in your game and nowhere in the press coverage is anyone really talking about Cuba and communism and this and that and the other." And everyone's like, "Why would you ask that? That's, you haven't played the full game yet, and why you shouldn't ask Ubisoft that." And I think it's a totally valid question. I mean, I think it's great. I think it's great that if games are going to wear the cloak of relevancy and importance and art, that they aren't just wearing the cloak, but they actually have the meat on the bones of that, right? I mean,
yeah. Don't just use it as window dressing. And if it is, then just say so. It's like, oh, whatever then. This is just a game that just takes place in a fake Cuba.
So do you think there are journalists that cover this? I'm going to be honest. I'm just going to say it, aren't smart or educated enough to understand what even to ask. A lot of these guys.
No. Well, I mean. I think that kind of comes back to like diversity in terms of like background and like also thought also, and education also too, right? Like you want to be able to ask these questions in the right framing. Otherwise, it's going to end up where it's like, okay, well, the Far Cry 6 director said it's not political. I'm not like pooping on anyone's coverage of it or whatever like that. I'm just saying like something might be taken out of context, or
right.
If like there's no mutual understanding between what we're actually talking about,
right?
Then like you might say like something like off the cuff, and like maybe you misunderstood my point or my question or what I was trying to get at, and then like you might just say something like off the cuff or whatever like that because it's just an interview or it's a live interview, or like you're like the way you were live streaming in Metroid Dread and you were calling this like the worst game design in the world. Right. And it's like, okay, well, maybe I can dial that back and say that, right? And it's like, because you're in that moment, and like, there's no real like safe like understanding of like, okay, like let's hash these issues out because this is a really really complicated issue.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Do you? I don't know if anyone has any questions for Gene. Would you take a few questions from the chat if they have any?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
all right. So if you guys have any, I apologize. I haven't been looking at the chat. Gene is just so goddamn fascinating that I cannot look away. But if you guys have any questions about Gene and what he does, or Metroid, or what have you, now would be a very good time. And for the super chats, I appreciate it very, very much. There weren't any questions in there. I did get one, but it's gone away. But that was sort of, I'll do that one later. Gage says, if you don't follow Gene on Twitter, make sure you do. He is very interactive with others. He's the reason I am watching. He says, you're a really cool guy. There you go.
Thanks,
the standards for video game writing are so low that The Last of Us 2, with its badly paced, contrived narrative, won the Best Story Awards. Well, okay, this is another thing that drives me batshit, which is just a lack of, because you mentioned Ebert, right? And I'm sure you've read his book. His book is delightful. Some of the best writing.
Such a great writer.
The biography.
He's such a great philosopher.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I just enjoyed so much listening to him talk about going to England and all this stuff. But it seems with movie critics there is a vocabulary or a shared understanding of how to talk about the medium, whereas I mean this guy brings up a great point about, I mean, and I actually enjoyed The Last of Us 2 a great deal. I thought it was,
I love The Last of Us 2.
Yeah. It's weird, I didn't like The Last of Us 1 at all, but I thought 2 was phenomenal, right? But regardless though, there is a difference between writing for interactivity and writing and directing cutscenes that live between the interactivity. But it seems like even that, it's like you can't even get games journalists and games reviewers to understand and or agree that if somebody says The Last of Us 2 has the best story of the year, but then a great game that tells its story through gameplay and interactivity, whether it's Desperados 3 or I think it was the last Call of Duty Black Ops 2 or whatever they called it. You played the campaign of the last Call of Duty?
I haven't played Cold. I tried to play Cold of War, but I got
Yeah.
Cold War, but I got a little bored. So
Well,
I'm just kind of bored with Call of Duty.
understood. The ending of it that
But
was
yeah.
really interesting in that it was like, it started being like a head trip for the character, and there were these doors.
Oh yeah,
dropping
yeah,
out
sure.
of-
I played that part with the doors falling down.
Right,
And
and you could
yeah.
actually make different choices about, the guys in your head saying, "I want you to do this," and if you ignore it, I mean, to me, that's game writing. That's someone who's going, "I'm writing something for the gamer to experience through interactivity, and not just like here's some fancy cutscene." Right? It's
Yeah.
like, why is it so hard for game journalists to get on the same page about what these like definitions are and how to talk about this medium?
Sure, I think a lot of it comes down to our personal preferences and what we find valuable in a video game experience. I think it honestly kind of reminds me of what you were saying earlier, whereas like I don't play Metroid or I don't play games to challenge myself. Some guys do. For me, I'm actually with you 100%. If I find a game that is telling an interesting way to engage me in the story and make me feel things through gameplay,
Right.
right? Like Shadow of the Colossus or something like that, versus like The Last of Us, where it's like I'm gonna play a shooting sequence and then there's a cutscene and then there's a shooting sequence and a cutscene. I'm gonna favor the prior,
Right.
Because I think that's a harder trick to pull off.
And it's
really,
more powerful when it works.
it really is more powerful when it works. Like for example, Death Stranding. Like I know some people have issues with that game, but like there's a new sequence in the director's cut where it's like you enter like a new area and there's no like you discover it yourself, and it's like it's a beautiful sequence. And like I just felt like this is so memorable for me because like I'm playing it by myself as opposed to like Hideo Kojima, who loves cutscenes.
Yes, he does.
Made me play this myself, and it's like I was like, thank you, Hideo. Like this is
Right.
so great. Like you really know how to do this. And, like so I can tell he knows when to pull that off, and when he says, okay, this is a cutscene time.
Right.
So like I appreciate when a game like understands that. And I'm always gonna value that more. But some people just really love a story. Like I don't really like the Life is Strange games, because they're just like a novel, right? I don't really like quantum, like the
Control.
the David Cage games, because like
Oh,
I'm really
Quantum
just
Dream.
like
Yeah.
like a Quantum Dream, right? Because I'm just kind of like going along. But some people love that crap. I'm not calling it crap or whatever. I'm just saying some people love that stuff. Some people just love being taken through a story, and I think it just really. I think it speaks to how diverse games are, that we get so many different genres, and that does kind of like have this difficulty of like there is no uniform. This is a great game, and this is not. IGN and GameSpot, for example, both reviewed Deathloop as a perfect 10/10, and then when I played it, I was like, oh yeah, this is totally like a 10/10, maybe a 9/10 game, totally, right? And then when I got to the end, I was like, that was a 6 out of 10 at most, Like
Yeah,
like,
I
don't-
couldn't finish it. I thought it was cool, but it didn't maintain my interest.
I thought it was super
caused the
clever, but
drop
it doesn't
for
go
you?
really past that,
So it was the cleverness that you liked, but afterwards, that's what caused the drop. There was nothing following up the cleverness.
There was nothing following up for me for that. So it's like I deeply disagree with the fact that like people think Deathloop is a great game.
Right.
But I think that goes to show like maybe just people just like the experience in Deathloop better. I don't know.
Do you think the industry suffers from that, what you're talking about? Because, like, whether it's writing about video game storytelling, like the fact that you clearly, I don't want to say get it because that's so condescending, but that you vibe with that way of thinking about video games, being able to push a narrative in a unique way to the medium, or to the fact that, like, right now, understandably, people are starting to talk about, okay, most of the big games are out. What's the game of the year? And the vast majority of conversations on the big sites and the big forums are about the usual suspects. Is it Ratchet? Is it Deathloop? And I'm a guy who plays all the console games, but I play a shit ton of indie games as well. And there's things that aren't even in the conversation of game of the year that I'm like, how are you not talking about something like Severed Steel? How are you not talking about something like Unsighted? How are you not talking about Alien Cube? When you're talking about, which I thought Ratchet and Clank is, I said it was. I think it's a classic. I think it's wonderful. But I don't.
love it, yeah.
I don't think it's a game of the year contender. I think it's
Sure.
like a great summer movie. But that doesn't get game of the year. That's just like one of the most you know, I kind of worry about this because I think it makes the medium take longer to progress because you have such different ways of thinking about it. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's me being selfish. Maybe the diversity is good. But I mean, did you think that it holds the medium back because there's such different ways of defining a game?
Yeah, I think the Game Awards was and Jeff Keighley is an attempt to try to like kind of standardize or normalize or whatever. I don't know really the word, but kind of like centralize what we celebrate in games.
Yeah.
And I think he's doing a decent job. A lot of it is done by journalists, right? A lot of picks are done. I'm not part of the board, so I'm just speaking freely. A lot of it is done by journalists, and a lot of it comes down to like we don't have a lot of time. Like I haven't had time to play any of those games that you mentioned. I'm going to try to make time for them now.
Right.
But like, I think that we are at a better place in terms of the fact that games journalism has been kind of weakened, and I hate to say that, but it's like the mediascape of things is such that like a big streamer like could play Among Us and Among Us would blow up, right?
Yes.
So like that does give me some kind of optimism where it's like, okay, maybe we can find other experiences this way because some of us journalists are just way too cramped to be able to play everything, and we can't recommend everything. That's why a lot of the conversations end up with AAA, and I hate that too. I think that's very, very regretful. But these games take so much time to play.
They do, and I got a guy in the chat right now that I don't mean to call you. Yeah, I do, because I'm going to call you out. So of course I mean to. Steve Brown, you're a fucking moron. He says, imagine a B movie winning awards. LOL. Doesn't happen, bro. First off, can we get rid of bro? Anyway, that said, though, I'm not talking about B movies. You know what wins awards in movies is indie films usually win awards all the time. As a kid, it drove me crazy. I love Spielberg, so Raiders didn't win because fucking Chariots of fucking Fire won. I'm like, you're kidding me, right? Or
Raiders should have won.
Right,
though,
I know, and so should have E.T. But ultimately, though, it's not. I'm not talking. There's so much association on the part of the fans of budget defining something that's good. It's like I'm not talking about a B movie, Steve Brown. I like B movies as well, Steve Brown. But I'm saying indie stuff doesn't. Indie movies get more of the love come award seasons.
Yeah.
But
and then so like Hades
was a nice
won
pop.
So much acclaim last year. It was the second most awarded game after Last of Us 2, right? So it's like, stuff like that keeps me a little bit more optimistic.
Yeah.
It does seem like that the conversation is kind of forming around different types of games. Among Us obviously is like the outlier of this conversation.
That's right.
But the fact that can happen still. And it wasn't possible during the 90s or even the early 2000s. I think that's a good thing. It's slow. It's so slow. Progress is so slow, man.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of like young folks like don't understand is that like being progressive or progressing in society is going to be really, really slow, and you're probably going to be as old as I am.
I know.
Or us before anything happens.
It's laying those little what is the line from Hamilton? It's like planting the seeds of a tree you'll never see.
I guess I hate Hamilton, so.
Oh, okay, well, you can go to hell. You can go straight to hell.
There you go.
But okay, well, listen. There's the good news is there's so many people in the chat. The bad news is, okay. Here's one question that did pop. There's two I see.
Sure.
Thoughts on Kotaku encouraging readers to pirate Metroid Dread? I don't know if that's. But go ahead. I'll let you speak to that.
I don't think they were encouraging it, but they did put an editor's note to kind of like clarify that they're not encouraging it. I do think emulators do exist, so it's not wrong to report on emulators, but at the same time, on the other end of things, emulators do exist. So it's like it's not also news to say, hey, people are emulating this game too.
Yeah.
So it's like you really got to ask, like, is this something that people really need to know?
They did a pretty interesting job, though, of almost giving you links, though. I mean, it wasn't just like emulators exist. It was like this emulator and this emulator. I mean, I don't know. I thought it was weird, and I was happy they put the editor's note in there. But
I think one thing about Kotaku is that people forget that it's still a blog, So like the reporters are reporting, but they're also reporting on their blogs too. So sometimes someone just might blog a thing. and
Right.
then it's
It just
just
goes.
meant to just be there. So I don't think like it's meant to be like look at this big piece of like Metroid emulators or whatever like that. It's just like, hey, they're emulating. And then so really the question is it news whether they're emulating or not? Like I didn't cover it because I don't think it's interesting news.
Well,
That's
somebody's
that's
asking
just my
you-
judgment. So
Somebody says, question to Gene, what is the most important story that is untold still about the game industry? I don't think he'll tell you if he knows, but he's not going to give that.
I have no idea anyway, so don't worry about it.
Elias Stapleton says, Gene, what do you think will happen to Fandom if Bluepoint is making Bloodborne without From Software?
I think Bluepoint has earned enough like goodwill and trust that where it would be kind of cool to see what they do. I wouldn't be against it, but it would worry me a little without Miyazaki's guiding hand. But then again, Miyazaki can't make Souls games forever,
Right.
So
right.
And Bluepoint, to their credit, they've learned from so many different studios. Like they've learned to work with so many different game engines. They understand so many different game philosophies.
And they are so you're going to be better at me than finding the word for this. They're so maybe reverent. Is that right? Like I had the president come in when I was streaming Demon Souls, the PS5 version.
Yeah. I think I watched that one.
And it was so I think I talked to him once at E3 ages before, but it was so neat to hear how it's all I don't want to be hyperbolic, but it was almost like the video game version of hearing when archaeologists are like dealing with like relics. It's like they were so careful when they were working with Demon Souls or even God of War HD. There was just this sense
that's right, God of War HD,
this sense of reverence to the material that I think you're right. They've earned a lot of good faith that I think it would be hard for people to, they're not just like, schlock guys who are just like, yeah, we'll make a Bloodborne, give us a fucking paycheck. It's like,
yeah, exactly. I think they've really earned their keep. Demon Souls was obviously huge, in terms of like, they really know how to make these games. So like, I would be interested in how they design levels, how they design a story. It'd be pretty interesting. And I would hope that Miyazaki would actually like pen the story too.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I wouldn't be against it. I think.
And thank fucking God, right? Am I right, Gene? They're adding the easy mode. Thank fucking God.
Oh yeah, I love easy mode.
You goddamn right.
I'm not even gonna touch that topic with a 10-foot pole.
That's right.
I have thoughts on it too. So.
Fuck you, Scott McClellan. I hate most of what he says, but he's right here. The line from Hamilton Jaffe is an old Greek proverb. Fuck you, I hate you, but you're right. Okay. I want to know if Gene would sit down, says Darth Nugget, and talk to Colin Moriarty.
I mean, if we have something worth to talk about, I'm not like super against it. So
Okay.
He's got a huge podcast. What am I going to do with it? Like it's like asking me like would I go on Joe Rogan? Of course I'm going on Joe Rogan. So
Right. Let me ask you this. Are you aware of the dislike of Colin Moriarty from mainstream?
Oh yeah, totally. I don't really fully.
Because I like the guy. If I knew him better on a day-to-day basis, I would be staggered if we weren't good friends. Like I've always enjoyed my encounters with him. I don't know what people's shit. What did game journalists dislike about this guy?
I forgot what he did. I think he made a misogynist joke and he kind of doubled down on it because he was with Kind of Funny, right?
He was with Kind of Funny, and on
he
International,
was with IGN obviously before it and Kind of Funny.
International Women's Day, he did a tweet that his girlfriend thought was hilarious, where he's like, peace and quiet, International Women's Day, day without a woman or something.
I don't want to make a judgment on Colin because I don't really listen to his show. So I've heard about what he's like, and I'm not going to make any judgment until I kind of really understand what his show and his philosophy is.
Yeah.
I've seen his tweets every once in a while. He does seem to be like sometimes contrarian, or like he does seem to be like, okay, well, maybe this will get some engagement or whatever like that. But I mean, we all do that, so whatever,
Okay, all right. If you have the opportunity, see, I think he's a great dude, very smart guy. Question for Gene. DD says, what do you think will get snubbed at most during the awards this year? Which game?
DD, what's up, man? I think it's going to be Lost Judgment because it's too Japanese for some people.
Okay. Okay.
But it's such a good story. And it's one of those games I think that we were talking about where it's like, okay, gameplay cutscene, but like the gameplay like adds to like what you feel in the cutscene. So and there's so much goddamn gameplay
If
that you
you've
never
never
really worry about how
played
much.
Lost Judgment, it's not Yakuza, right? But it's the developer worked on it or something.
Same developer, yeah.
So if you've never played any, because it's part of a series, or no? If I came to that fresh,
It's part of the series, but if you never played anyone before, you can go into the Lost Judgment just fine and just do it. Like if an old character shows up, they like in conversation they give you enough information. You'll be like, okay, well this is that relationship with the character. That's really all that's important to the story. So it's like, okay, you kind of get that. You might be a little bit more enriched by knowing like what that character has been through, but in terms of like understanding the story, like it's just a crime drama story.
Okay.
And it's just about a 40-year-old skateboarding attorney. You know, it's awesome.
Okay, good. I will. That sounds great. I'll give it a play.
And you beat the crap out of a bunch of high school kids, which is like the main selling point of the game. Like you go into a high school to investigate a bullying phenomenon. And then you meet the bullies, and then you beat the absolute hell out of them every time, like several times.
That would I don't think Sony would publish that game. I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean, like that probably would be too shocking. Like I remember we had to take Violence and Twisted Metal Black back in the day out because it was two kids beating up each other, and they're like, yeah, we can't do that. So
no, this is you are the 40-year-old man with a skateboard. Like just absolutely caving in these kids' faces. It's hilarious.
I'm in.
Yeah.
Gene says, Andrew, what's it like writing about games for a non-games dedicated audience? Does anything stand out?
I think it's a great opportunity, and I think it's the reason why I like staying at the Washington Post. I think it's a great opportunity to have a platform to further understanding of games as an art form, as something that's really engaging. That's something that's obviously the dominant pop culture entertainment medium today. You know, and I'm so glad the Washington Post like recognized that, and I helped them recognize that. And I think it's a unique opportunity to help bridge that understanding. Like I would love to. I've always wanted to write for an enthusiast site. I've always wanted to write for IGN and GameSpot, of course. But I think being at a place like the Washington Post presents a unique opportunity that I think I don't want to miss out on. So.
Right. Okay. Last two questions. Tristan says somebody got bullied at school. Apparently, I don't know if that's true. Well, there you go. Maybe you did.
I totally got bullied. So like the opportunity to again be a 40-year-old man and go back to school and beat the crap out of these bullies.
Perfect.
It's just like I was like, this is game of the year right here.
That's
sorry,
right.
Like
that's exactly
like
right.
I don't like any like design arguments, whatever like that. I was like, this is game of the year right here. So.
Okay, last two questions. Gene says a different era. Does the new Metroid justify the $60 price point, and how much time should pass before we see the next one, like the next entry?
Oh God, I do think that it justifies if you really are into Metroid games. I played about 30 hours of it, which is more than enough for a $60 game. I would argue, and that's because I've beaten the game 5 times, 3 times on normal and twice on hard. And on hard mode, I almost got it under 44 hours. So like I'm really close. So I'm gonna try it again. I'm gonna keep doing it again and again. So that those hours are just gonna keep add up. So for me as a Metroid player, it is absolutely worth $60 because I'm getting so much value out of it, even from the initial run. That's why I hated reviewing the game after only beating it once, and that's what this piece. And David, again, thank you for contributing to this piece.
Thank you for coming here.
I want to argue that like it's like you really needed to play the game like several times to be able to understand it. So that's what my piece is going to be at. In terms of like when we need another Metroid game, I have an interesting perspective. I think that Metroid Prime. David, did you ever play the Metroid Prime games?
That's the retro ones.
The retro ones, the first person. Yeah.
No, I never did.
You should, because I think those games actually address so much of your concerns. It's really, really well directed. Really, really fantastic like world design, memorable world design. Obviously, it's the first person, so you're engaging with everything, and you can scan everything. There's no hidden blocks or anything like that. If it's hidden, you can scan it, and you have to interact with it, right? I think that the Metroid Prime series absolutely needs to come back. because it was so innovative. I still don't see a first-person shooter quite like it today. Every time I play a first-person shooter, I was like, well, this kind of isn't like Metroid Prime, so I'm kind of bored, you know?
The only place to play Prime now would be, because it's not on the Switch monthly.
Yeah, it's on the Wii U. Yeah, it's on the Wii U. So they got, whenever they do that Metroid Prime 4, they gotta release that Metroid Prime Trilogy Pack soon, because I think that, you know, even Part 2 and 3 have so much interesting stuff going on there.
The Trilogy Pack is on the Wii U?
The Trilogy Pack is on the Wii U.
Okay, cool. I still have my Wii U, so that's good.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Okay, so what would I do if I want Metroid fans to love me and stop being mean to me, Gene? What do I need to do? Do I need to make...
It's too late. It's too late. We already beat you. That's it.
Fuck them,
it's too late.
Fuck them. Fuck them. Last question. You covered crime for a while.
The funniest tweet I saw roasting you was this man has really become the DSP of gaming. Do you know who DSP is?
I do now, because I'm like, you know, what's funny is so many of these people are younger than me that they're like, haha, old man, you're getting ratioed. I'm like, bitch, I got a mortgage. I don't give a fuck about getting ratioed. I don't give a fuck about being filtered.
Well, I did see people making fun of you for being a boomer, and I'm like, if he's a boomer, then he would understand Metroid, you know?
Like I fucking, you know, I was in high school with the NES. I grew up with the Atari when I was a fucking kid. So, you know, maybe it's a conversation for another time about the ageism. I have been absolutely staggered that is their go-to insult. That it's like, oh, you're old man. I'm like,
yeah,
motherfucker, I'm alive. I made it to 50. That's more than some of y'all do. Some of y'all kill yourselves, God forbid. Some of y'all die of disease, accidents. Fuck off, bitch. I made it to 50, you know? So I don't know. I found that vitriol so fascinating. It
kind of goes back to my earlier point about games journalists not having enough time to play games. You were a kid, you had all the time in the world, and you had your NES, and you still didn't play Metroid back then.
No.
Because there's so many goddamn games to play.
That's right.
And again, these games take a long time. You took 3 days to beat Indiana Jones, or Hook.
That's right.
So it's like people play these games at different times. So like some games are just going to be, there's going to be a lot of people that this is their first Metroid.
Do you think gamers are worse than other fandom? Do you think they're meaner or more vitriolic, or do you think it's same with sports, same with music, same with everything?
I think they're pretty. I think fandom in general is pretty vitriolic. You know, obviously I've seen the political side of the things. I think politics vitriol is so much worse than gaming. The vitriol, I was like, just call me a game journalist again. I prefer that now, because that's what I am. So it's okay, you know.
Okay, this really is the last question. I know you've given up so much of your time, and I appreciate it. But I've been wanting to ask this. So when you covered,
you gave me your time, so I appreciate it too.
Well, when you covered crime, because you were on the crime beat for a while, you said, right? What was the most gruesome thing you ever had to cover? Like, what was just the most?
There's two. I was out at a bar one night with my photographer. I love telling these stories, so I got time to tell these stories. Cool. I was at the bowling alley bar with my buddy photographer Rick, and we got a call at 12:30 saying that there was a triple homicide, and we're both drunk as shit. But of course we drove, right? Whatever. Because we had to cover this triple homicide. It's in a small community. I'm from Guam, the island of Guam.
Okay.
And sure enough, it was 3 dead people. It was a vegetable stand, and the guy. Oh, it was a double homicide. Oh wait, no, triple homicide. The worker there, who was a 17-year-old kid, the woman who owned it, who was a younger woman, and who the shooter was in love with, and obviously he got rejected, so he just went nuts. And the younger woman's mother. So I was there at the scene of crime with 3 dead bodies, and then the shooter, of course, tried to shoot himself. And then he was on the curb, like being processed, and he had a huge wound on his face, you know. So
so he failed, but he
failed and he went to jail. So he got treated and he went to jail.
And it was like gore and stuff. I mean,
it was super gory. Like at that moment, I had seen dead bodies before, but at that moment, I had never seen like gore like that before. So so obviously after the assignment and I finished my story, I was like, let's go out drinking again because I need to get another goddamn drink.
Right. Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
Does it stick with you? Obviously, the
Oh,
story.
totally. I totally was traumatized by it.
Right, I imagine.
And it you know, and to get real, like it definitely like fueled my alcoholism. I continued to drink more to try to forget that stuff. I'm sober now. I don't drink anymore.
Right.
So,
I think you're just trying to be like Ebert, right?
Yeah. Well, look, I'm 40. I still grew up with the mentality of like the old school chain smoking journalists. So I'm still addicted to the goddamn nicotine.
I simply because I will never get to go on tour of like a proper newsroom like in the movies, but I want to see the coffee cups and the rolled up sleeves and the cigars and, you know, Parker, get in here.
If you make your way out to Washington, D.C., I'll happy to take you on a tour to Washington Post Newsroom.
I would, what an honor. I would love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
I will hit you up. Fellas, this has been Good Sir Gene Park. Am I Park or Pack? What is your name?
Park. Actually, Pack is the Korean way you would pronounce it, like Pak.
Well, I'm looking because I can't read the font on the screen. I'm like, did I type Pack? It's Park. Good Sir Gene.
Pack would still be culturally accurate, so I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
But it's Park. So.
Okay, fair enough. There you go. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for reaching out. And let me know when the article goes up, and I hope to talk to you again, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. Great talking.
All right. Bye, buddy. All right. Bye. So I'm going to stay on real quick with the chat, but Gene goes off into the night to write his story and do his wet works. Oh, we didn't talk about his assassination work that he does. But anyway, guys, that's been the chat. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be back streaming later today. But thank you guys very much. Thank you, Gene. I'll see you guys. Bye, everyone.